Now get subscribe and save data directly into Google Sheets using Gorilla ROI. We have two. The first one that I'll be going through is subscribe and save forecast report. So this is going to be the same forecast report that you find in Seller Central, except now you can pick and choose which particular data points you want and build out your own tables as needed and keep track of the performance of your subscribe and save products. Refer to the documentation as usual. There's syntax descriptions that are important. So the order of the syntax, whether something is required, whether something is optional, and how to enter, as well as descriptions and explanations. So refer to that. There's in addition to the explanations, there's also the sample formulas. So enter this, play around with it, and see what type of results you get. With SNS Forecast, the easiest is to just enter equals Gorilla _ SNS Forecast and then close the formula, press enter, and it will create a table. It will auto-generate this table with the headers information. The different types of information and data points that you see is going to be average discount 8 weeks, the average discount over the 8-week period of this forecast. Country, how many active subscriptions you currently have on each SKU or ASIN, the date, the scheduled units for the first week, second week, etc. up to the 8th week, as well as the last one will be the offer state, whether it's enabled or disabled. The important thing to note is that this is based on the forecast report. So it's not based on your historical information, or it's not giving you how many were sold via SNS like last week. That's for SNS performance report, which is on a different video. So check that one out. If you don't want to create a full table like this, you can pick and choose whether you want to just display, say, the active subscriptions or the average discount over the past 8 weeks, the offer state, etc. So this way you can create or add on to any existing spreadsheets that you may already have. Let's go ahead and try that. I know that the header name is going to be offer state for one. Refer to the documentation because it has the information here. So the data point, which is the optional, this is what it is. I am going to get offer state and let's do active subscriptions because that is one of the most requested ones and that people will use. Gorilla _ SNS Forecast. For the filter, it's the same as whether you enter a SKU or an ASIN, but it doesn't mean that you have to enter everything in full. What the filter means is that it can read if it has a similar text or similar sequence of letters, then it will be able to grab it for all of those particular SKUs. But in this case, I'm just going to do it by SKU. I have the SKUs in column C. I could also do ASIN, which is in column D, but just for the sake of example, which is easier, I'm just going to hold and drag down all the different SKUs that I have. And then I press comma, semicolon if you're in Europe or South America. Marketplace, I don't have to enter marketplace. It's going to default to my own, but if I want to get granular and just define it rather than having getting information that may be for the wrong markets, just enter it yourself, comma, and the return sign. To get individual data points, if you leave it blank, it's just going to create that table. So rather than doing that, you have to use the data point, single data point in the formula, like this, single data point, comma, and then the data point, the two that I want is offer state and active subscription, so I can do a range like this rather than just doing it one time and then dragging it 1,000 times or whatever. Okay, let's load this formula and then you'll see that for this particular SKU, okay, so it's shifted here because I entered it into the wrong place. So I'm going to copy this formula, I'll just delete it first, and let me re-enter it here. And again, it's going to get it for all of these SKUs for these two. And you'll see that the result shows that for The ones where it's not active, where there is no SNS, it's going to show NA and enabled. If there is a product where it's set up for subscribe and save, but it's not working, you'll see disabled or not available or something like that. And you'll see the number of this, the active subscriptions is the number of people who are currently subscribed to that particular SKU. And this way you can monitor your performance and see how the growth goes in terms of the product in the SNS program.